Under the Fig Tree Ministries presents The Ministry of Listening, Part 4 in a series on Deacons Ministry in the church.
Benjamin Disraeli once said, "Talk to a man about himself and he will listen for hours." In this episode, we want to talk about the ministry of listening. You know, listening is easy. Just close your mouth and open your ears, right? But there's actually some wise counsel that we want to seek on this. And we've asked a counselor or two to share some of their thoughts on what it means to listen, the art of listening, as it were. And the deacon will do well to be a good listener, to even practice these principles of listening, and to encourage people to talk about their occupations, their interests, their hobbies, and so on, just to talk about themselves. But listening is the ability to accurately receive and interpret messages. That's why we need to think a little bit harder about what it means to listen. It's part of the communication process to not just hear the words, but to listen and to bring into ourselves what the other person is actually saying. What are they trying to tell me? And they may not use their words directly to say what they're trying to say, but it might be a heart message, and we need to know how to interpret that. So this is when communication becomes the most important. It's also when it breaks down and the speaker becomes frustrated because they aren't able to say what they're trying to say. So we're going to ask these counselors to help us to think a little bit more about the art of listening. We're continuing a series on training deacons, helping deacons to be equipped, empowered, and encouraged in their ministry. In this video, we're going to be talking to Tom Peters, a registered psychotherapist. We've asked Tom if he would share some of his insights into listening skills. That's what we're talking about here today. And Tom, what are some of the key principles of good listening? How do we listen to people and make them feel that they're being heard?
Thanks for inviting me here to this question. I think some of the principles in listening is receiving the information, actually caring for the person who's speaking, understanding what it is, what they're saying. There's a bit of an evaluation about what they might be meaning with it, as well as remembering some of the facts, just remembering some of the content that they're disclosing to you, and actually be able to kind of give some feedback and response to it. So I think that's an expanded version. That sounds like a lot of steps, but they sometimes happen all at once, right?
It's not just receiving and hearing, but there's, as you said, there's evaluating that goes on. For the deacon who is going to be hearing a story, a heartfelt revelation, perhaps, what does it mean to evaluate?
Well, evaluate is to know that I've heard it accurately, that I've heard what the person is actually feeling about what they're saying, how what they're disclosing is impacting them. And the evaluation isn't about trying to give them advice. It's actually probably not the best to do that unless you're invited to do that. But just to really be able to know what that content is, and maybe sometimes even help them say it and understand it in language that they might not have thought of before. So it's a facilitation in listening. It helps to draw it out of the person.
You don't want to start giving advice, but you want to give them feedback so that they know that they've been heard, that you understand what they're saying. Is that correct?
That is a very critical part, and not neglecting how you're caring for them while you're doing it. Right? So you also care for how they feel. Especially important for the helping field. When we're listening in a helping role, like a deacon role would be, we're caring for what this is like. This is very often personal information, very vulnerable information, maybe confidential, maybe hard to say. So I think caring for that, having some kind of a way that we're helping them to understand that we're guarding that information and it's important to us. It's a way of, I think, showing love, the love of God, the way God listens to us in our prayer. It's a way of extending that kind of love while we're listening to the people.
Tom, what are some examples of poor listening skills? And without, of course, sharing names and places and all of that. Do you have any stories in that regard?
Well, poor listening skills is so often is an interruption, a distraction from the person you're trying to help, from them telling you what's on their heart. So when it's interrupted, when it's when we're impulsively trying to kind of push our own story onto them, having some ways that we're limiting what they want to say, we're not really inviting more. I think those are all unhelpful pieces. Now, very poor listening skills would be, and this is actually might happen quite easily when, for example, I go to see Bob in the hospital. Bob is there for something, and I ask him about, what's going on for him. I want to care for him, and he tells me, well, he's got this and this condition, he's got whatever. And I said, well, that's exactly what I have. I know somebody like that. And then we make it about us. Mm-hmm. And we're stopped listening, and we're stopped receiving and caring. That would be an example of a poor listening experience. We haven't really heard what Bob feels about it. Even if we think we know, even if we would actually know, it's not coming from Bob.
Mm-hmm. And we think we're relating, and that we're relating in our minds as caring. So if I have a story of Bob's got a heart condition, and I know of somebody else who has a heart condition, and I'm going to say, well, that person pulled through, and that's supposed to be encouraging, but we're not listening to Bob. Isn't that correct? That's the problem.
That is the problem.
Yeah.
That is the problem. We're actually not validating Bob. We're thinking we're helping by bringing something from the outside that Bob has no relation to, mm-hmm. and it's not Bob's story. Mm-hmm. We want to hear what it's like for him mm-hmm. to have a heart condition.
Right. Could you describe active listening in a situation where a deacon may be visiting someone in their home? Mm-hmm. Maybe explain to us what active listening is, and then how one would go about it. Mm-hmm. And is that appropriate for deacon ministry?
First of all, say yes, this is very important for a deacon, because I think active listening is very important for the helping field. Active listening is really listening to with reflection, that I'm hearing what the person is saying. Mm-hmm. So that's an active stance. That isn't just hearing what they've said, it's actually letting the person know, I've heard you, I'm hearing you. That's the definition and the technical term of active listening. Active listening, I still think it's like a whole body experience that we kind of do. We're focusing, we're directing our attention, we're giving undivided attention, mm-hmm. and we're letting the person know, this is what we're hearing. Mm-hmm. Paraphrasing it back, asking is that what you mean? Is that what it's like? Letting them kind of correct you if you haven't kind of got it the same way. Mm-hmm. I think there's another component of how we can make sure that we're actively listening. Mm-hmm.
Well, what would active listening look like? Is there a way of demonstrating that here for the people that are watching?
Well, it is the reflecting back. So if I reflect back on your question, so I'm hearing you say, Daryl, you want to know in particular what active listening is like. Mm-hmm. What it all involves. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so you've just paraphrased what I've said, not word for word, right, but giving me the impression that you heard exactly what I said.
Right. And that would be an example of active listening.
Okay. And is that something that, say, the layperson, as we call them, or the non-professional, in this case the deacon, is that something that they can learn or actively use? Is that a skill that's possible?
Certainly possible, because it has application way beyond what a deacon role would be mm-hmm. in our relationships that we have with our spouses, with our children, with other people. So many applications where listening is so fundamental. If there's one skill that I encourage my people that come to me, my clients, to use, it's to listen. Mm-hmm. If you don't need to have all the other answers, you don't even have to agree with the person. Mm-hmm. Do them the favor of listening to them. Mm. You're showing that you care, you're giving them space. You're actually averting a lot of other problems that come out of dismissing people when you're not listening. I think this is a skill set that is important. Mm. And if a deacon can really become skilled at that, that'll be just a really important tool in their toolbox. Mm.
Well, and it seems like we would avoid a lot of frustration, or people would have less frustration if they felt that they were heard
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. Nothing will get frustration faster than being dismissed and not being tended to. Not being heard.
How important is body language in listening to people?
I think listening is a whole body experience, as a whole person experience. I think that it involves our mind, it involves our emotional aspects. I'm trying to feel, trying to get a sense of what the other person is feeling. The short answer to the question is the body has to be involved. When we're doing all those things, the language will speak it. Our body will be in that spot.
If we were to demonstrate body language, now I know that there's certain interpretations with body language. This has always meant defiance, but sometimes if I'm relaxed, this just means this is the way I like to sit. If I'm fidgeting and using, like, if I'm visiting someone in the nursing home and I just can't seem to sit still, that conveys anxiety and the ready to bolt kind of thing. Are there other physical cues that we should be aware of?
I mean, I think looking the person in the eyes, openness to the other person, in our stances, as much as we can comfortably be comfortable within their presence. So, sort of that open stance, I think is something to keep in mind. Again, if we are feeling comfortable inside, that's going to become more natural.
What would you say to a deacon that suddenly realizes they have transitioned from merely listening to what we could call counseling?
If they feel that they are going into some kind of interaction where they feel unqualified for, to keep listening to them, but to direct them to the resources that they might need. So if they can identify in the person that, okay, you're really anxious about this heart condition of yours, Bob. I can tell, that isn't good for a heart condition anyways. And so I'm here to support you. I'm not gonna, abandon you here, but maybe there's somebody who has some more training that might be able to help you with that part of it. So just knowing what they can help them with and what's beyond what they want to help them with, whether it's just what they decide to do, as far as their role is. I still think there's always a role for support, and a deacon has a role to do that. And so listening is always a safe way to do this, and then stay connected. It doesn't mean you're irrelevant. There's always a place for support.
You've kind of referred to a medical situation. If it's a psychological or relational issue, then the advice would be the same. Don't be afraid to refer to a professional. Is that what you would advise? Yeah,
I mean, there's mentoring aspects that you can describe in sort of eye language, So, if there's something that relates to a problem, maybe it isn't Bob's medical problem, but maybe it's Janet's relationship that she has. And so Janet is concerned about her spouse and her family, and you say, well, I've had some challenges of family. These are some of the things that I've done in sort of a mentoring way. I can reflect, but we want to kind of be careful. We're not advice giving, and we're not trying to play the roles of the counselor that they may not want to be playing with them. And you say, if you have more questions about that, or if you feel you want to dive further into that, I can find a resource for you where you can go and get those answers.
Yeah. I could see the temptation for some deacons to exert their care or their gift of care into that area and then find that they've gone in too deep, as it were.
Yeah, there is. I mean, some of these things are critical. They're critical situations, and some things are just going to make that situation likely to make it worse, or some likely to make it better. And so, just knowing not to overextend what they shouldn't be trying to do, knowing that maybe some limits, that's responsible caring when you're not attempting to do something that you don't have the qualifications for. You can reflect some things, you can share some of your own experiences, but be very, very careful about that going further. And so you don't have to have all the answers to care for people.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. How would you encourage someone who is typically quiet, is not a talker? How do you get them to talk?
No, that's an important question, Daryl, because there is something we want to be respectful about when people are silent. They may not have built a trust relationship with you. They may not trust others easily at all. They may have been traumatized by disclosing their personal information to some unsafe person or some person who doesn't handle it well.
So they've been burned.
They've been burnt in that and been hurt in that, and they're going to say, I'm not going to do that again. And so I think just having some respect for that, sometimes I even go to the point of saying this you might want to, this is hard for you to say, or you say as much as you feel you can right now, and I'm going to care for you the best way I can. And so you really are, allowing them to build trust in you and give you the information that they are ready for. You let me know how I can help you. If there's any other way that I can do that, I'd be interested in hearing that from you. And then maybe go down one of those roads to be caring for them instead of the talk caring.
Right. Well, and a person may simply be a quiet person. They may not have been burnt. They may not have had their trust breached, but they're simply a quiet person. But they've gone through a trauma. How do you get them to talk? That's, or like you say, maybe talking isn't the thing.
Well, it isn't everything, because I think we communicate in more ways than just talking. So, again, I'm going back to my caring stances, right? If we can care for them, if we can find a language that speaks to them with care and concern. Sometimes when people are grieving or have a crisis, maybe we want to drop off something, we just want to show up, maybe we just want to, some other expression of our care for them.
Right.
I mean, there's a variety of options that we should be thinking about. The whole principle is we want to help the people.
Right.
We want to help them. It's not about us. We have to have the focus on them.
Right.
So if we're leading them to the water, or the trough, we're doing a critical part.
Right.
So let's just not minimize those other steps that might be involved in caring for people.
For more information on Deacons Ministry, go to utft.ca for more videos.